This is Semi-Detached Finn, a story about strange houses, serious cats, and small things that aren't quite what they seem. Episode 1, Finn and the Doorbell in the Bushes. Finn was a boy like so many others. He had a mop of brown hair that never quite stayed flat, a dark forest green coat, and orangey-brown trousers that always looked a little scuffed at the knees. He walked the way some people read, slowly, curiously, with his hands in his pockets and his thoughts somewhere else entirely. Over one shoulder hung a soft, saggy backpack, worn from all the places he had already been, and behind him petted a dark grey cat with a serious face and an even more serious name, Professor Pausington, although Finn usually just called him Cat. They were used to moving. Finn didn't mind it much. He never stayed anywhere for long. Finn had been walking for a while when he passed a perfectly maintained house. The lawn was striped from careful mowing, the hedge was trimmed into a perfect cube, and every flower pot looked like it had been spaced out with a ruler. It was the kind of house that didn't just look tidy, it looked like every part of it had been maintained to perfection, which is why it struck Finn as odd to see what it was attached to. Next to it was a strange sort of bush. Not just a bush, really, more like a green explosion. It spilled over the pavement like it had something to hide. And at first, Finn thought that it was just that, a particularly overgrown patch of greenery. But then he saw it. Hidden among the branches, behind a scraggle of ivy and tangled leaves, was a doorbell. And where there's a doorbell, there is usually a door. Sure enough, tucked just out of sight was an old wooden door, weathered and leaning slightly to one side. No path, no welcome mat, no mailbox. Just a door, sitting quietly where no door should be. It was a semi-detached house, though you wouldn't know it at first glance. The tidy side on the right looked like it had everything under control. This side, however, looked like the garden had taken over, and clearly won. Finn tilted his head. The cat blinked once, and Finn, who had nowhere else to be, stepped closer. Curious, Finn made his way through the bushes, almost tripping over a particularly unruly piece of ivy, but finally cleared enough space to admire a little more of the house. The house was small and slightly crooked. One part leaned against a tree. The other looked like it was holding on for dear life to the house beside it. Finn stepped forward and reached for the door handle. Before he could touch it, a small, rather plump-looking sparrow fluttered down onto a low-hanging branch beside him. She ruffled her feathers, looked him up and down, and somehow, quite unmistakably, raised one eyebrow. Finn hadn't known birds could raise eyebrows. He wasn't even sure they had eyebrows, but this one definitely did. Then she said,
"The polite thing to do would be to try the doorbell first, you know."
Finn blinked. The cat blinked. The sparrow gave a short, satisfied "humph," as if she just corrected something terribly out of order. Then she fixed her eyes on Finn, unblinking, as if waiting for a thank you, or an apology, or perhaps just a little more respect. "Are you the owner?" Finn asked after a pause.
"Certainly not," the bird snapped, sounding thoroughly offended. "I'd sooner nest in a compost bin."
Finn glanced at the crooked doorbell, then back at the bird. "Right," he muttered, and pressed it. The doorbell didn't make a sound. The bird gave an exaggerated sigh.
"Typical. Broken, just like the rest of this place."
There was a long moment where no one said anything. Then,
"Well,"
she said, fluffing her feathers again.
"aren't you going to ask my name?"
Finn blinked. What's your name?" The bird gave a satisfied nod.
"Miss Tottle," she said crisply, "with 2 T's. I keep an eye on this place. Someone has to."
"Does anyone live here?" Finn asked. Miss Tottle scoffed.
Does it look like anyone lives here? Of course not.
Then why did you make me press the doorbell? Finn asked, slightly annoyed.
I don't quite like your tone, young man,
Miss Toddle said, looking rather offended, and with a flutter of her wings and one last offended humph, she took off. Finn, feeling rather confused, shook off the odd exchange and proceeded to the door. It wasn't locked, so he carefully opened it. The inside looked like someone had once tried to tidy it up, but then gotten distracted halfway through and just never came back. There was a hallway with faded wallpaper covered in tiny ducks. Strangely, most of them seemed upside down. A crooked coat rack held exactly one rubber boot and what appeared to be a very fancy walking stick. The old floor made it impossible to walk without it creaking under your feet. And then there was a clock on the wall that couldn't quite seem to make up its mind, ticking too fast, then too slow, and then not at all. The rooms were dusty, but not too dusty. Something still worked. The light above the sink flickered a bit, but stayed on. There was a soft chair in the corner that Professor Posington instantly claimed as his own, by sitting down, licking his paw, and glaring at Finn as if to say,
"This is mine now."
It might not have been everyone's cup of tea, but Finn loved it. And with that, he decided to stay. Just for a little bit. That was episode 1 of Semi-Detached Finn, Finn and the Doorbell in the Bushes. In the next episode, a cucumber leads to a spider leads to a toothbrush, and the toothbrush, well, it sorts things out. Just not always the way you expect. See you next time.